Welcome, welcome. Come on in, pull up a seat. If you're new here, my name is Dan, and if you're not, you already knew that. I have had an idea rattling around in here for a while to make an end grain cutting board that is what I'm calling an 8-bit end grain cutting board. So this is going to be walnut and mahogany, and we're going to do it in the pattern of a little 8-bit character that you'd see in a vintage video game. I have my walnut and my maple here. First step is I'm going to have to cut this walnut down a little bit so I can run it through the planer. They are both way too wide to run through the jointer. So I'm going to have to flatten them on the planer or cut them down beforehand. I'll make that decision in a moment, but let's get to work. All right, here we are. My blocks are all glued up. I had to run them over the sander just to take out a little bit of tear out. They're all ready to go. Now comes the really challenging part, which is going to be the glue up. And that was going to always be the challenging thing about this whole project. Usually when you make end grain cutting boards, you basically make a regular cutting board, you cut it into slices, turn each of the slices on end, and re-glue it. This one, I'm going to have to do it all in cubes, and I'm going to have to glue them all up separately. They are square in this dimension on the end grain, but they are wider than they are taller. So I won't be able to get that mixed up. I have my chart, my little plan ready to go. So let's start laying things out. My first thought was to use my strap wrench, which this is really handy. This, as you can see, this just loosens and these go on each corner. Let me do a test with that. I'm just worried that my big concern is that things aren't going to stay square. And if this will, in fact, hold everything square, then I can just start applying glue. I'm going to use the Titebond 3 for this because A, it is waterproof or water resistant at least, and B, I think it's got the longest open working time of all of the glues that I have. This is my concern, that it's not going to pull everything in nice and tight and square the way I need it to be. Like I just can't have gaps and irregularities in this. Everything has to be dead square. Hold on, that looks like it's got a bit of a flaw in it. I want to swap that one out. I may rotate some of these blocks too. to get grain patterns looking the way I want them to instead of just sort of being random. And it's not. See, it's holding things tight, but it's not. So you can see over here, it's holding things tight, but it's not squaring them up. And that's the problem. That needs to be square. So how are we going to solve this problem? I'm wondering if I don't take some plywood and just make like a little trough. So I could drop that into the trough and glue it up, clamp it and glue it up and go from there. Okay, so this is not an optimal way to do this glue up. Preferably, I would have been able to put together a big jig that would hold all the squares together all at once and glue it up that way. But I really didn't have materials on hand to pull that off. So what I've ended up doing is gluing it all up one row at a time, which is, you know, it's getting the job done. It's a lot more tedious. I could have banged this glue out up in one day if I did it that way, instead of like about 4 or 5 days that it's been taking, because I have to glue up one row, let the glue dry enough to take that out of the rig, and then glue up the next row, yada yada yada. And after I do this, I'm going to have to glue scrape all the rows, which I think I'm going to run them through the jointer. Is my plan right now. Jointer and then maybe planer, to make sure that's all cleaned up and nice and square and such. And then I will have to glue the rows together. Gluing the rows together will be a lot easier than gluing up each individual row, I think, because that I'll be able to do in just one go. It's big. I'll have to use my biggest clamps to do it and see if I can figure out how to do cauls. I may just have to wax up some long strips of wood and do that. But point being, it's a lot more straightforward than trying to do them one row at a time. So this is tedious, but it is getting the job done. And that's really what's important. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do, right? Okay, all my rows are glued up. And it's looking not like a terrible disaster. What I need to do now is clean up these surfaces so that they'll mate evenly. And I think I want to use the jointer and planer to do that. I do have one row here. It looks like may have bowed just a little bit. There's a little bit of a gap and a little bit of a gap. And I think I can take that bow out without losing too much material. Run the jointer over this and see what we can do. Okay, all my rows are finished. I've edge jointed them all with my jointer and my planer. So all of these joints look nice and square now. A little nervous, but it's time for the glue up. This surface is a little uneven. There's some squeeze out that needs to come off. That's not a problem. But I don't think there's anything here. It's got a little bit of a bow to it that I can't take out with a sander. The rows all feel pretty good. So I need some giant ass cauls. I'm going to need at least 4. I think I'm going to run them this way. Actually, I'd like 6. 1 here, 2 there. Because my clamps are going to be going this way. See, if I'm going to be clamping this way, do I want my cauls running with the clamps or across the clamps? No, along the joints. We want the cauls to cross each joint. All right, little clampy clamp without any glue. And now I can pick this up as a unit and put my 3 bottom cauls in. God damn, this thing is heavy. Ugh. Okay, well, I might technically be going a little overboard with all of these clamps, but like the lines are nice and straight. That makes me so happy. Like all of these lines being in line with each other. I use this as a reference edge and everything seems nice and square. That's pretty close. It's not too bad, but I can trim that with something. I don't know what I'm going to trim that with. Maybe the table saw, but I can trim this to square it up. That's not a big deal. Anyway, now I'm going to move this, like, I don't know, 50-pound monstrosity over to the radial arm saw table. This glue is going to give this at least 24 hours to cure before I do anything else. I'll have some time on Wednesday afternoon, so this is Monday morning, or this is Monday afternoon. It's around 3 o'clock on Monday. Thursday, I've got some extra time in the afternoon, so I think I'll plan for Thursday to take off the squeeze-out bits, which I might do with a hand plane or chisels, probably a hand plane, and then go to town with the sander and see where we're at. Well, well, well. The time has come, the walrus said, to flatten this fucking thing. The glue up is finished. It's good. But now I need to sand it down and flatten it. And I was going to attempt to flatten it just with a random orbital sander, but the variance, even though it's good, the variance between the pieces is too much to try and do with a sander. And I've been going round and round trying to figure out how to do this. Because I don't own a drum sander. I don't have space for one, even if I wanted to get one or make one. So I had to figure out, how am I going to flatten this? I had a couple of options. My first thought was I have an angle grinder with a flap disc. I can take off shitloads of material, but it's really tough to get a nice flat surface with that. I used it on the coffee tabletop I'm working on, and there's slight variations in it. It's fine for something we're going to own and use, but it's not going to work for this. My next thought was to use my radial arm saw with a dado blade and just take very light passes across it. And I think that would work, except that the motor on my radial arm saw seems to have shit the bed. So I am going to build a flattening jig. I think it's actually going to be an entire flattening table. and I'm going to use my router to do that. And that build is going to be an entirely separate video. And when we come back to this, this will be all properly flattened and sanded. Poof. Okay, well, here it is, all nice and flattened. I did get a little bit of tear out along the edges. That's not a big deal. I was planning on retrimming these anyway, and that should take care of that. I mean, I've got a walnut border all the way around, so losing like a 1/4 of an inch or whatever off the edge won't be a big deal. Time to get sanding. Well, I fucked up. As you can see over on this side here, I was trying to trim this after flattening it to take off the rough edge. And as you can see, somehow I got the angle off. Instead of make sure it was square to this, so I'm thick at the top and thin at the bottom. So now I have to fix this. The most obvious solution is to cut another set of walnut blocks and just rebuild that edge. That might also be the smart thing to do, which is exactly why I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do actually is cut this off completely, cut off the other edge, and make breadboard ends, for which I got this here piece of walnut, if that's in camera or not. We got a nice 8 foot 8/4 piece of walnut there. Now, the thing about attaching a breadboard edge to this, basically a breadboard is going to run this way. So the walnut, hold on a second. So the walnut grain is going to run like this along here. The issue with that is, and with attaching any kind of breadboard, is that you're dealing with cross grain situations. Now, usually with a breadboard, you'd be attaching long grain to end grain. In this case, I will actually be attaching long grain to long grain, but in a completely different perpendicular orientation. So this grain is running this way, this grain is going to run this way, which means each of these individual squares will change size. Everything changes size with heat. Wood also does it with humidity. It expands and contracts. That's the words I was looking for. It tends to expand and contract more this way along the grain than this way, the length of the grain, because the fibers don't want to stretch. So we've got to have wood expanding and contracting in two different directions. So if I just glue an edge onto this, it's likely to fail. So we need to figure out how to attach it. There's 3 ways I can think of to do that. The first would be a tongue and groove. We cut a groove all the way down the length of this and a tongue on the piece you're attaching and stick it on. I'm not going to do that one because the tongue and groove would be visible on the end of the board here, and I don't want that. Another way is with floating tenons, a mortise and tenon. So you cut a hole in this, you cut a hole in the walnut, and you take a short piece to run in between them, and preferably probably pin it too, which means you put the tenon in, you drill a hole up through, and you tap a dowel in there, and that'll pin that into place. Alternately, I can just use wood screws. If this were the piece that's going on the end, I can drill through this a hole that's slightly oversized for the shank of the screw and go run the screw all the way through the breadboard and into this, but the hole in this will be tight. So it'll fit tightly in here, but there'll be a gap. Maybe I'll put a graphic on here somewhere. There'll be a gap around the screw so the wood can shift without putting shearing forces on the screw. And then I can do walnut dowels and plug the ends. I'm genuinely not entirely sure right at this moment which way I'm going to go. But I have time to think about it because the first step is to trim these edges off, not screwing it up this time, making sure they're straight and square or parallel or whatever you want to call it. And then I need to mill up some walnut and make the actual breadboard ends that are going to go on this. So let's get on to that part. Well, that went a lot faster than I thought it would. I've got these 2 rails all milled up. They just need to be trimmed to length. The only question now is how to attach it. Am I going to go with mortise and tenons, or am I going to go with wood screws? And you know what? What I'm actually going to do is think on it for a bit before I make any decision. I'm going to probably sit overnight with this at least. It has already been several months that I've been shooting this video since I started this project. For various reasons, it's taken a while. I had to build the flattening sled. I had the disastrous craft fair weekend in between. But now we are ready to finish this up and have it done in time for the next Beef Barn craft show in September, end of September. Got just over 2 months. But I think really what I'm going to do is sit on this. So the next part of this video, whatever I film, is I'm going to have made my decision and we're going to start attaching these things. Will it be wood screws or will it be mortise and tenon? You'll know faster than I'll know from the moment I'm recording this. You know, last night I was editing all the little video clips together for this big video that I've got so far, and it occurred to me towards the end of that I probably could have gotten 2 or 3 videos out of this project instead of one longer one, but I'm not going to undo all the editing I did, so here we are. So, I think I've decided what I'm going to do with this. With the breadboard ends, I think I'm going to use tenons, and it makes me nervous because tenons have the highest failure rate compared to the screws, or the biggest chance of screwing it up, because the vertical placement needs to really be precise down from the top of each piece. Screws, I would have a little bit more play with. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do tenons. I was also worried a little bit about the thickness of this. It's only like 1.25 inches thick. I was concerned about how thick of a tenon I can get. I think it'll be all right. And I need to cut tenons. The reason I have to use loose tenons is because of grain direction. Because if I try to take this piece and cut this so there are tenons coming off it, then the tenons are going to have the grain running this way on them, and they'll break very easily. So whenever you're doing a tenon, the grain needs to be running in this direction. So that's why I'm doing loose tenons for this. The first thing I need to do is trim both of these end pieces, the breadboard pieces, down to the appropriate length. And from there, I'm going to get out the router and start making tenons. If I had $1,300 for a domino, that's probably what I'd be doing, but I'm going to show you that a router can do everything a domino can do. All right, I have a couple of different bit options here. These two are 1/2 inch, and this is 1/4 inch. 1/2 inch thick would give me stronger tenons. The issue is how much material it's going to take out of this, and is it going to weaken the square? So 1/2 inch, this is 1 1/4. 1/2 inch is 2/4. 1 1/4 is 5/4. It leaves like 3/8 of an inch on either side. This is a lot thinner, obviously. It'll leave a lot more material in here, but it'll also make for a thinner tenon. Although I think a 1/4 inch tenon will probably be enough. So I'm going to go with the 1/4 inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the mortises first, and then I'm going to cut the tenons out of the piece of scrap off of this. I'm going to cut the tenons to fit the mortise so there'll be a nice tight friction fit. I also have the choice of using a trim router or my plunge router. Now, having a plunge router, that makes it a lot easier to go in and make a little mortise and be done. With this one, I'm going to have to bring the spinning bit down into the wood freehand, although I will have an edge guide on it. But I think the trim router being lighter is just going to be more stable and controllable. And I am going to make some test cuts first, obviously. Maybe not so obviously. But we'll go with the trim router and we'll see how that does. All right, this is not the final glue up. What I'm doing right now is checking my vertical alignment, and that is just about as perfect as you could ask for. I'm feeling a slight ridge there, but I can sand that one down. Over here, this one is dead on perfect. I did mess up one of the tenons over here on this side. For some reason, I had it shifted like off half an inch. Not a big deal. I just cut it extra wide. One wide tenon won't mess this thing up. So before I glue these on, I want to do a little more work to them. I want to route like a little channel over here, so it's got like a pickup spot, and probably break these edges a little bit. Okay, well, sometimes it feels like I don't often get a moment when it's that big of a win, but this one is that big of a win. There's some slight variations along here. Might even be that the cutting board isn't perfectly flat, but it's nothing a sander can't take care of. That's pretty damn good, if I do say so myself. I think it looks great. I think that's exactly what I was going for. And next step is sanding this. All right, well, here we are. Construction is finished. All that remains is the finish. I am going to use Tried and True, which is polymerized linseed oil and beeswax. Normally, I would want to use tung oil on this, but I don't have 3 months between now and my next show, and I want this to be ready for my next show. So I'm gonna go with Tried and True because it'll cure a little bit faster. I'm not gonna go with mineral oil because I still think mineral oil is a rubbish finish for cutting boards. It never dries. It's not durable enough. I want something a little more durable. This won't be as good as the tung oil, I don't think, but it will be better than mineral oil. You know, because I screwed up and I had to do the breadboard ends, it's not exactly what I had originally imagined, but it's pretty much what I originally imagined. I mean, I didn't imagine it with breadboards. I imagined it with just regular ends, with just end board ends, but the center part is really exactly what I had in mind, which is a nice feeling. So we're going to give it about an hour after this first application, and then we're going to go back in and buff off whatever excess is left behind. I'm going to do all 4 edges and the bottom of the cutting surface, but I'm just going to leave the bottom of the breadboards. Well, no, I can do them too. Problem is they're going to get all mucked up sitting on the bench, which I'm not a fan of, but I don't know what there is that I can do about that. And this I have to do kind of tipped up like this, because if I put it flat down, I'll be putting the top face against the workbench and risk getting it all mucked up, and I don't want to do that. And I do have some feet to put on this too. I'm not going to make a cutting board of this scale and not put feet on it. I know people have like pay extra and get feet on your cutting board, or pay extra and get a juice groove on your cutting board. I don't know. I suppose that's a way to make extra money, but I guess I just feel like I'm offering you a superior product, period. So all my boards are going to have cutting feet, or going to have feet on them. They're not all going to have juice grooves. I don't think a juice groove is really like a necessity. Yeah, see, we got all kinds of sawdust and muck on the side there now. That's all right. It'll wipe right off and it'll buff off later because it's not really gluing it. All right. Now we will let this sit for about an hour. I will go edit some more video. And then we will come back down. I will rub this down. Maybe buff it with some steel wool to give it a nice shine. And the next time you're gonna see me will be the recap and we'll finish this up. Well, here we are. It's finally finished after months and months and months of work and pauses. I think I may do like another pass of finish on it. We'll see when this tried and true is fully cured. I might want to do another one, but it came out like exactly I was hoping it would come out. I'm very excited about this. Will somebody buy it? Who knows? I think the right person will fall in love with this piece. A lot of hard work. I am so glad I got these mortises right. That felt like a big achievement on this. Building my flattening table, my router table to get this flattened was another kind of achievement along the way. And I built something that I'm really proud of. So this is one of my longer videos. I hope you enjoyed it. And who knows what the next one will be. Probably something in the beginner tool series. I'm gonna get digging down on that next. And of course, some turning videos will be coming. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. I should be telling you that. Especially share. Let other people know about this goofy little channel of mine. And we'll see you in the next one.